In this episode, I'm talking with Dustin Ramsdell, host of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where he explores the impact of edtech on the student experience with leaders from higher ed institutions, companies, and nonprofit organizations. We discuss interesting trends he's seeing in his conversations with higher ed leaders, common challenges, and interesting ways institutions can leverage data and technology to streamline and ease the student experience. But before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe to the show to stay up to date in the latest creative data-informed approaches to student success. Now, welcome to Next Practices. I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we get into the nitty gritty, I'd like you to take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your work in higher education.
Yeah. I mean, I came up through a very traditional path, definitely compared to where I've ended up. But I was a resident assistant for 2 years at University of Delaware, and I was a history major with a leadership minor. The leadership classes were some of my favorite ones, very influential, I think, just for sort of my viewpoint as I entered into my professional life. But I went to grad school at Rutgers University, studying higher education. I was working on campus, obviously throughout being an RA and grad school and every summer in between and all that kind of stuff. So just feel like I really, was always aiming to immerse myself in working with students, supporting students, understanding kind of how everything worked and worked best. And after graduating, I worked on a campus as a resident director for 2 years professionally, and then started my journey into the ed tech world, working at a couple of online program managers, OPMs, and currently working at another ed tech company that kind of focuses on digital experience stuff. So I feel like it's kind of just I've kind of been migrating towards a broader viewpoint through those different jobs where my work at the OPMs were just kind of student success coaching for one program, but obviously very influential of just what is those students at that institution's kind of specific experience as an online student, and now kind of thinking kind of more broadly of kind of digital strategy and all that kind of across many institutions. But throughout all of that, I know kind of the undercurrent and through line for our conversation today, I've been hosting the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. Is sort of a moniker that I picked up as I was finishing up grad school many years ago. But it's been an amazing experience for over 6 years and over 200 episodes talking with folks, whether it's, folks that work at an institution, work in ed tech or in nonprofits or other areas, just about sort of their experience, their viewpoint on what's going on, the work that they do and, how they do it, why they do it. And just certainly definitely focusing a lot on sort of that, partnership of how technology is sort of augmenting and supplementing the work that folks are doing to recruit and support students. So with my background being very much in student support, that's often kind of the lens that I take with the conversations, whoever it is. But definitely always, especially at this stage, trying to find those areas where I feel like I learn as much from the conversations as anybody else. So it's been a really, really meaningful journey for me, and that just this constant through a lot of different jobs and moving and stuff like that. So it definitely really helps inform my perspective too. I do really learn a lot from the conversation. So it's really great to, have opportunities like this to, have a little GM session and talk more about it.
It's funny, you and I have very similar trajectories. I too started off as a history major, actually went on to grad school and got my master's in history, and went into thinking I was going to be a high school history teacher, did my teacher training and found that high school wasn't for me, and then decided that, I really like college age students, thinking I'd become a professor. And while in college, while in my graduate program, had the opportunity to have an academic advising position. So worked full-time and went to school part-time and just fell in love with student success, and then slowly worked my way through student success and advising, and then moved over to doing content and overseeing content for an ed tech company, Civitas Learning. So it's interesting, our trajectories and how many ways you can still influence. My through line is everything I've done. It's always been about helping young people succeed. From the moment I graduated college until now, even though it looks like I've done all kinds of different things. There is that shared through line. It sounds like that's the same for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's like, you know, thinking about, I guess, how it sort of looks from the outside looking in. People have kind of told me, that's like, oh, it seems like everything, like there's good sort of like, kind of connective tissue, kind of a continuity through things. And it's like, I think sometimes it is like, people kind of like fall into things or whatever else. But it's like, yeah, like I'm sure maybe to a certain extent, it sounds like, this is the same for you, where it's like, it's pretty intentional. Yeah. Like I don't want to get too far from, the student experience. And, like I said, most of it has been around kind of digital student experiences, and whether I myself or the people that I am like overseeing are working and talking with students every day. Even now, my job is like, okay, what are the problems that students are facing? What are the problems that, institutions are facing? How can we kind of like, find that area of the Venn diagram where it's like, okay, institutions are, trying to navigate digital transformation, do more with less, create kind of relevant, engaging experience for students. What are their demands? How do we sort of, find that union and everything? But, that's always kind of the North Star. And you don't want to like, I guess, get too far from that, either literally or figuratively, because then I think you just start like being like overly reliant on like, okay, what was my experience like as a student, or, just kind of anecdotes or something, like you kind of just start to maybe get a little bit off target. But yeah, so I think it's been an interesting journey. I think just like still feeling like I'm learning a lot, even just that sort of environment of working with institutions versus at one. So I think that's always just a point of reflection and processing of how best to, partner with institutions.
Yeah. Well, your tagline for the Higher Ed Geek is that you've been geeking out about higher ed since 2013. I know that, like you mentioned, that talking, that's giving you opportunity to talk to folks from a wide range of institutions, organizations that are keeping, they're staying really close to what's happening in higher ed. With that in mind, and your eagle eye on patterns and trends, are there some exciting trends that you're seeing that leaders should be paying attention to, or that you find that most leaders are thinking about, or leaders should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, because I feel like I've always been kind of on the outskirts of it, and it does feel like we're at kind of a tipping point or kind of an inflection point, whatever you want to call it. But with like workforce development and sort of like, working to learn, learning to work, and like, there's a lot of kind of terms that people throw around and everything, but it does feel like we're at this moment where a lot of people are talking about it, focusing on it, thinking about it, and that there seems to be this like really unique opportunity to create pathways for students that really are accessible and provide relevant, engaging, useful skills and everything else. So like there's just, I feel like been all this kind of stuff kind of floating in the ether around like skills. It's all about skills. And then, it's all about like, the work that maybe like a guild does to like, provide funding so that people can like, move up or move on or do whatever it is. Like, so I think there's like kind of this union happening of a lot of these sort of trends that kind of end up in a place where hopefully students can quickly obtain a relevant skill to get a job that's gainfully employing, that can then fund them to get further education, like just that initial on-ramp. And whether that happens on ground or online or hybrid, it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think just like, it's even just opportunities like this to try to start like connecting the dots. Like I feel like sometimes even when I'm talking for episodes of my show, I'm like just sort of, processing out loud, like trying to kind of follow this thread, because it feels like it's really meaningful, where like some people have remarked that it's like, the work that people are doing around like apprenticeships or something, and expanding that kind of framework. Like it's been very slow going for a while, but there's, even forces around, maybe expansion of Pell for like short-term program, like, and just there's forces coming from all sides, whether it's federal, different states, or institutions that I think we've seen be more accommodating of like boot camp models for various offerings. And so I think that's definitely one big trend line, because I almost like, don't even want to say AI because I think it's like we all acknowledge that is going to be an influential force in the years to come. That one I feel like is kind of where a lot of this stuff that I'm mentioning, like AI is now where workforce stuff was like a few years ago, where it's just like, yeah, it's still really early stages. We are seeing sort of this like, mirage on the horizon or something, where it's just sort of like, I don't know, like, is it real? I don't know what's going to happen. And, we've got to kind of make our way there. But yeah, I think just we're at like, with all of those sort of like trend lines and forces, it's also that breaking point of students feeling like college is too expensive. It's not relevant for me. It's going to take too long and all that. So like that is really, I think, now bearing out to see that it's having an impact on how institutions are developing their strategy, developing their offerings, choosing what programs to cut and kind of downsize and right size and adjust, what type of experience they're offering to their students. Because it could be like, okay, let's get more towards a 3-year bachelor's. Let's get more towards a competency-based education. Let's get more towards, closer partnerships with these companies in our area that are looking for a certain type of skill set. And if we can do a shorter certificate program or associates or something else, it gets them in there, and then that company can kind of further them along with their studies at this institution or elsewhere. So I think all that to say, partnerships is going to be a very big trend line that I'm sort of watching. And, it's not even going to be like, oh, there's going to be one company that's doing this and that's, they're going to be like the end all be all. But it's a big, complex issue. So it's going to take a lot of organizations and people working at this to sort of, move things along and get to a new kind of paradigm and status quo where higher education is able to sort of plug in with what students want to learn and the way that they want to learn it, and doing all that in a cost-effective way.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm seeing a similar trend there. I think there's like a multifaceted approach to helping students persist to on-time graduation within budget, like not go and have starts and stops and drop out and then still have the student loan, but not the credentials to show for it, or feel that it's overwhelming to access it in the first place because it costs a lot of money and a lot of time, or going through the process and that process becoming very expensive and taking a long time. What can we do to streamline the student experience and make it approachable and make it something that students can navigate and navigate clearly, so that they can stay within sort of the confines of their time and budget. And that I think it's interesting because one way to do that is the more structural approaches that you're talking about. Can we make there be support and funding for micro-credentials? Can we shrink down the bachelor's degree? Can we create interesting student experiences that make getting education more accessible and translate into gainful employment? And then on the flip side of that is, how can we remove systemic barriers to completion? How can we make sure students understand their degree requirements? How can we make sure students can succeed in their courses? How do we make sure that students enroll in the credit hours that they need to persist to on-time graduation? So I think it's very interesting what you're saying. It aligns with a lot of what I'm seeing as far as the effort to remove those barriers to completion by fostering like really user-friendly academic planning processes, making it really easy for students to make schedules that fit their complex lives. Most students aren't necessarily just only doing college. They're working, they're maybe caregivers, they're juggling a lot of different things, and they may have limited times that they can go to college or go to classes. And then you have two like institutions delivering an academic product that's student-centered, that students can access classes and the modalities at the times that they need to. I think it's a big part of it too. So I think that's super interesting, seeing something really similar. And I think there's a lot of different things that institutions and technology companies are doing to sort of get at it from all sides.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think that's, like you said, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned was sort of like kind of this existential, systemic, structural kind of forces. Like, and it does feel like that's maybe like, oh, it's, too kind of like 30,000 feet, sort of point of view. But like, you do have to like exist in the world that we're living in. And these are the forces, the trends that are happening. And then like some of the more like tactical things that you mentioned can help sort of achieve like the goals, or sort of like follow the trend line of like, oh, students want, more relevant or engaging or efficient, academic experiences and everything. And it's like, yeah, it's everything from like, what are you teaching? How are you teaching it? And then like, what is sort of the environment that they're doing that in? That's, what's sort of the digital experience that you're creating? How user-friendly is it? How easy is it to navigate like different support resources? Because I feel like, there's always people kind of bemoaning like administrative bloat or something. And I think it's like, well, yeah, like it's hard to like defend like, no, all of these are like really important, needed resources. Students find them valuable. If like students don't even know they exist, they're not, accessing them readily. Like you see that's been something that there's been a lot of people doing kind of surveys and write-ups on, of just that students like, just in terms of like events or whatever else it might be that's going on that an institution is offering, they're just like, didn't even know that was available, or didn't even know how to access career services and like these things that would be really valuable. It's like, let's make this academic experience as, effective and efficient as possible. Let's not belabor the point and have someone spend their time and money for like, longer than they need to. But then like, during whatever time they're studying at the institution, it's like, let's get them the help that they need when they need it, how they want it. The idea of like getting working as a coach, where it's like, okay, they can access it, like they can text their coach, they can call their coach, they can email their coach or whatever. You're like, let's be just as available as possible, versus them like just, needing that support and kind of just giving up because they're hitting friction or kind of hurdles and stuff. So, it's like you want to create that environment where, it just sort of aligns with sort of a modern, simple kind of way to know like what courses do I have left in my program, everything from that to I'm having like a really tough time right now, like how can I get mental health support from my institution, how could I maybe plan out like a potential leave. Like I know working with students, it's like they'll just kind of like muscle through it and be kind of like really stressed and burnt out and everything. It's like, hey, you take like one term of leave, like take a break, go take that vacation or whatever else. And it's like, and then you come back like ripping and roaring, you're doing amazing. And you're like just way more sort of balanced. But it's like, that does take like maybe like a series of conversations with an advisor or with a coach or whatever, like to do that the right way and not get to that point where you're so burnt out, you just bail out. And like you said, like some credits, no degree, but a bunch of debt, like, that's the situation that plays out for so many students right now. So it's like, hopefully situations like that give kind of a compelling urgency to be like, okay, let's be really thoughtful about, the experiences that we're creating for our students to retain as many as possible.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side, we see that opportunity to streamline the experience, the student experience on the whole. But on the flip side, are there trends as far as concerns and challenges that you see could continually rising to the top of people's minds as you're having your conversations with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just sort of bold and underline circle the one around like, a lack of student awareness of resources or the things that are going on campus. Like that's like a big concern, where it's again that idea that like, the institution has built it, so they assume that students will come. Like we're putting in all the work to do all these things, but you can have this sort of great infrastructure and support system, but like the modality of delivery matters. Like there might be, okay, we have a physical space that's open during regular business hours, or all it is maybe like there's an email address and that's about it. But then so everything kind of gets bottlenecked there. Like you want to again kind of have a kind of wide array of kind of availability and sort of accessibility for these resources, because I think it's that idea of the sense of community, the sense of belonging for students, like that's very very much lacking and still kind of in kind of the rebuilding stage after the isolation of the pandemic, and that students just don't know maybe how to navigate kind of building that for themselves. So like there's just that much more need for support, but then students are sort of struggling to get access to the resources, whether it's again the modality of delivery of what is available, or the bandwidth of what the institution and has available. But so I think that kind of loneliness, that sort of lack of awareness, certainly just like stress and all, a lot of these things are the things like we're just seeing, thankfully, like a lot of research to kind of validate, because I think a lot of institutions will be like, oh my gosh, so many students are coming for counseling or saying like a stress, and it's like, okay, now we kind of like definitely have the hard data to back it up, and just the understanding is certainly like, okay, well, if you're just like, all work and no play, it's like, yeah, that's kind of stressful. Like, you don't even know like any fun things that are going on campus. So you're not really having these opportunities to like build connections with your peers, or, even like, mentoring relationships with faculty or staff, like just if there's just not an environment that's making that sort of availability very open, because it's like, faculty often, all this is like, well, you can come to my physical office for my office hours twice a week or whatever. It's like, well, maybe at least also offer that virtually. Some people did it only because they had to, and now they aren't doing it. Like you just have to really think through with intentionality, like all those details. Because I think it's like you're seeing these sort of stubborn problems and challenges right now that I think, again, just take a wide variety of solutions to kind of address on that kind of institutional level, like what kind of the campus culture and climate is that is working to address those problems.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think understanding your particular unique mix of students and your institution-specific levers and opportunities to help those students, and challenges and barriers to success as well, is a really important piece of that. Because I think like you said, if you build it, they will come. There are so many students out there that they have other things in their life that are competing with their college experience. Yeah, their education is important to them and they want to be successful, but they have lives that are more complicated than maybe in a previous generation of students, especially as the population of students becomes more and more diverse across many different demographic factors. And I think too, sometimes students don't even know. I think a challenge we talk about a lot with the folks that I talk to from higher ed is that there are students that are well equipped to advocate for themselves. They're hand raisers. They know to go to the resources on campus. They will do it. They're brave enough to raise their hand and go to the tutoring or to go to the advising, to the advisor for support or whatever the resource is. And often that student isn't the student that's at most at risk for not persisting through the college experience. They have a sense of how to navigate it. Maybe they've learned from family members. Maybe they have gone to high school that prepared them for the experience. And then you have students who just don't know to advocate for themselves. They feel intimidated. They aren't aware. They can't make it work in their schedule. They don't know what to ask. They don't want to look stupid when they show up in some professor's office. That they need and benefit from proactive, tailored outreach and proactive connection with the resources that are going to be relevant to them. And they need that to be something that they can access and that can make a really big difference. I think that's interesting. I'm seeing a really similar trend in that students, there's like a gap between all of the resources and apparatus that institutions have for student success, a huge investment in student success, and still there's a gap in student outcomes. And I think it's because sometimes those resources are there, but the students who need them most aren't necessarily ones connecting with those resources or those experiences, and that can cause a bit of a gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a big, hopefully that's kind of ringing in some people's ears, is sort of the passiveness versus the proactiveness, like just a big sort of paradigm shift of, again, like we built it, we're here, super welcoming in terms of like website pages or flyers or like these sort of things. But it's like, you have to kind of, move beyond just doing that, try to be a little bit more proactive. And, certainly my work as a coach, it's like, I had expectations to be like reaching out to all of my students within a particular time frame. So I think that always made sure that like, yeah, you could catch that student a quick 15-minute phone call where they're like, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you. Like, thank you so much for reaching out. Or like, if you ask good questions, you can kind of uncover where it's like, oh, okay, like you're feeling a little, again, like stressed out, burnt out. This is a little bit too much for you. Like, there are options to like slow down or kind of adjust your schedule or do it like, I have all this stuff in my head. I'm not expecting you to memorize and know all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, like those opportunities to make it easy for them to, benefit from my insights or sort of my information, my resources, or being like, hey, yeah, you've got a super unique situation going on. Let me look into that for you. Like, there's that idea where like, yeah, they don't know how to advocate for themselves, or they don't know how to, find what they're looking for, or if it even exists or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. And I think how even like structurally, maybe at the institution, you can adjust like, yeah, the hours that your staff are available. Is it like, maybe going like a hybrid model, or, what are the various like digital tools you're using for outreach or scheduling, or, just different like communication and stuff. So yeah, all really important stuff to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I think you starting to kind of set us up for a good segue in that. Like part of it too is, the frontline staff that is supporting students, advisors, coaches, mentors, career services. Like their wide array of folks that are on a campus to support students often have capacity constraints. They have so many students that they're supporting and helping, and so using technology and data to help them make it feasible for them to have go from reactive to proactive, I think is a big opportunity as well. So with that kind of in mind, I know you talk a lot about edtech and leveraging data and leveraging technology in your conversations on the Higher Ed Geek. Are you seeing interesting ways that folks are using data and technology to tackle some of these student success challenges?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the moment we're in, chatbots have existed for a while, and I think we're seeing now that they're being empowered with AI to be even more sort of knowledgeable and sort of helpful. So I think it's making sure that you have a good strategy for something around that, where like sometimes it's like, okay, if you have a mobile app, it's embedded in that experience, it's embedded in kind of a web experience, and maybe students can even just text it as well, like that sort of thing. So that gives you kind of this like ubiquitous 24/7 sort of conduit to hopefully get questions answered, or sort of funnel them and sort of escalate them to the right folks. And then certainly hopefully having like just a more integrated digital experience on both like the front end or the back end, because I think like you might have again like a bunch of amazing tools or different things, but they're not speaking to each other, or there's just kind of like siloed to the people that kind of work in there day to day. Because I know like as a coach, I at least could like view into like courses that were in my program, so you could see and not just like take it at a student's word of like, yeah, everything's going great, everything's perfect. Like, and sometimes you like play coy at least to start or something, just to be like, how are your courses going? And you could be like, oh, I know that you've not submitted an assignment in like a month, or you didn't do so well on the midterm. But and sometimes you just lead with that, like you make it more clear that like, hey, like. And the joke I think is like, hey, I'm like a big brother, like big brother watching you. It's like, I'm like a big brother in a good way. Like I'm watching you because I care about you and I want to help you. Try to like alleviate any of those concerns. But I think sometimes like students expect that you have access to everything. There's like some level of expectation that you can look up, everything and know everything and all that. So it's like, you don't want to, I guess like almost like lose credibility because like the institutional culture is saying like, no, you can't access that or whatever. It's like, I've always been the advocate for like, if you can give kind of role-based access of like view only or whatever, or just knowing that it's like, you couldn't break anything even if you try, like, so have at it, go peek around, do whatever, so that kind of transparency, that accessibility on like kind of the staff front is good. And then again, like on the front end kind of integrations around like kind of the digital experience as well, I think is helpful to be thinking about. But because yeah, I mean, I think the better that things are sort of integrated with one another, if you have like a CRM kind of platform or SIS, whatever you're using, depending on how sophisticated it is, it's like you hopefully could not have to do too much manual digging or hopping around different systems to understand like, okay, is this student active in the LMS? When was their last login? Like, and you can see that as a data point. Like, what is, grades in currently enrolled courses or overall program GPA, or like these just like quantitative data points where it's like you pull up something, you see all this data. And again, I'm speaking very much from like what my life was like as a coach, but I think it's sometimes helpful. Like whoever it is on campus who is working with the student, you understand what's going on, and you don't have to necessarily like go ask somebody else and wait and make them have to look it up for you and send it to you, or just, do without. You at least are having your staff, work within kind of a digital ecosystem that allows for them to like have whatever they need at their fingertips to help inform them about like, what's going on with the student. So I think those are things that I think about a lot. It's just like, I guess, a sort of cohesive, integrated digital ecosystem, both for the student experience, but also for like the support staff experience. And then hopefully you can kind of see if it's like, okay, who didn't retain or who dropped out. It's like, okay, these are students who like, weren't logging into LMS as frequently as other students or something. You can start to like really back up things that I feel like sometimes like the gut check makes us feel like, oh, this has got to be right. This is, this is just what I feel. And, is informed maybe from, my background or, my education. But I think you're kind of getting at this too, is like, you want to make sure that you're understanding like, well, what is happening at University X, like how are students kind of navigating this space? Because it might tweak a little bit in terms of what is actually happening in front of you versus sort of the theoretical kind of anecdotes or different things, or like the headlines that you're seeing elsewhere. So I think that's even just kind of a caveat for everybody listening, is sort of like, don't just like take our word for it, like, sort of confirm what sort of the nature or the extent of like what's happening at your institution, because then that'll help you to kind of navigate better of like, okay, we should invest in a different tool or restructure how our staffing is set up or whatever, because it's just like a something unique to how your institution is sort of experiencing.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? What you're saying is interesting if we think about it like they're back in my day, back a long time ago when I first started in higher ed, best practice and benchmarking to your peer institution was, I think it still is a really important piece of the puzzle, but I think that gives you contextual and foundational experience. And where I'm seeing institutions make huge headway is when they can couple those that traditional practice of best practices and benchmarking with information and data around their own student body and their own institution, and like what are the opportunities for success and persistence and retention at their institution, what are the barriers to those things at their particular institution, and they can start to invest in the experiences that support students. And it's not even just like across the board, it's these particular groups of students benefit from these kinds of opportunities, and they can start to get really precise and also really focused in their efforts, so that they become much more scalable, and they start to sort of accumulate small wins. Like they save, percentage of students over here, and they save another percentage of students over here, and that starts to have like accumulated effect over their overall student success. And they're making really, really great gains, because most institutions have done the low-hanging fruit of the big best practices programs. Now where they are is, who are my students? Like you were saying, how do I get my staff across institutions to coordinate their efforts so that every time a student comes into an office, they don't have to repeat themselves? I think what you're saying, I hear quite often that students, especially from their high school experiences, expect you to know, because in high school, everyone could see all of their business. So they expect that people on a college campus know their business, know their grades, know how they're doing in their classes, and oftentimes are surprised that not necessarily everyone knows, or that they're not all connected, that there's not a repository of information around the student. I think there's opportunities using student success analytics as well to help to forecast and predict, and help to prioritize students who are at risk and might benefit from intervention. So I think what you're saying is so true. And I think the power to really refine approaches is having that data and information more connected and more diffused across the institutional apparatus, not having it siloed. And so leaders see the reports and they kind of know the trends, and then they have recommendations on how. I think there's like a multifaceted approach where leaders can look at data, they can make informed decisions on where to invest, what to allocate resources to, what's working, where to organize, how to coordinate, and also front-end users can have information to know, like, how can I help this particular student? What student do I need to reach out to? Which student needs engagement? And those things together can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even just with what you're saying, like, it will be sort of contextualized or informed by like, okay, because the idea is like, okay, at risk, like, what does that mean? It's like, it means whatever you want it to be. Like, you can sort of understand that in a sort of like benchmarking level and then sort of adapt that or sort of, refine it to be more applicable to, your institution, your culture, and your approach of how you're going to try to support those students. So I think, because that's what I always want to like, where it's like you want to at least like base things in like best practices, but then a lot of institutions want to kind of put their own, touch on it. And it's like, yeah, like there should be flexibility in this and not feeling like you're, backed into a corner. And again, that there's one only way to do any of this kind of stuff. It's like you do just want to at least kind of base it and, what we're talking about, and then make sure that you're, orienting it in the right direction for your students.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. And so I want to give time before we sign up. Anything that you see interesting that leaders should be taking advantage of, other opportunities, anything else you'd like to share before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my own experience, like I've worked remotely for a long time, so I'm always looking for good opportunities to like get out and about and be in community with fellow higher ed folks. And so I would definitely encourage, just trying to get out to events. I think, because I think some people maybe are just more, kind of keen on that than others. So I think trying to find those right communities where, that gives you the opportunity to kind of, talk shop and benchmark with your peers, get some new ideas, different strategies. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing in, higher education that like people are just willing to at least like show their work and be sort of helpful to each other. Because I think it's just, we share obviously the same core values of, just wanting to help, support students in their academic goals. So I think, I've found some good, different, unique events that I just didn't even know existed a few years ago. Because I think just with sort of the hiatus that everyone was kind of going through with conferences and events, kind of emerging from that, and various organizations, like I'm thinking like Times Higher Education is one that like didn't really see much from stateside, like they're being UK based historically, that like they're certainly with their acquisition of Inside Higher Ed, like just doing a lot more events around student success, digital universities and all that. And I found them to be like just really just very relevant, where other organizations just like maybe are, for better or worse, just more generalized. So I think that's kind of some of my parting words, call to action that I always like to end my shows with, is to like look into those things, because I think that can help maybe give you a little bit of a shot in the arm, a little inspiration and motivation as you're tackling these very kind of complex issues.
Yeah, I think this is why our podcast exists, right? Is to create dialogue and practice share and to think through these ideas, build community across higher ed to help solve these challenges. Dustin, thank you so much for coming on Next Practices. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was really great chatting with you.